The Spinster's Secret Investment. Chapter 1. The Invisible Woman. In the grand, gilded world of London society, Miss Elara Finch was a piece of furniture, a particularly well-polished and reliable piece, to be sure, but furniture nonetheless. At 31, she had long since been relegated from the marriage mart's hopeful debutantes to the quiet, dependable spinster aunt who lived in the corner of her brother's house. She was the one who could be counted upon to entertain the less amusing dowagers, to ensure the teacups were always full, and to fade, chameleon-like, into the floral-patterned wallpaper the moment a truly important guest arrived. Her brother, Viscount Ashworth, was a man of moderate intelligence and immoderate self-regard. He saw Elara as a useful, if slightly melancholic, fixture of his household. She managed his correspondence, soothed his irritable wife, and acted as a governess to his 5 boisterous children. In return, she received a roof over her head, a meagre allowance, and the unspoken understanding that she was to be grateful for his benevolent charity. What Viscount Ashworth did not know was that his quiet, overlooked sister possessed a mind as sharp as a Calcutta trader's cutlass and a memory for figures that would make a Bank of England clerk weep with envy. This mind, starved of intellectual sustenance in the drawing rooms of Mayfair, had found its nourishment elsewhere, in the financial pages of the Morning Chronicle. For years, Elara had secretly studied the shipping news, the price of tea and spices, the fluctuations of the market. It began as a simple intellectual exercise, a game to pass the endless, empty hours. She would track a ship's journey from London to the Orient, calculating potential profits based on its cargo and the prevailing market trends, and then compare her predictions to the actual returns published months later. More often than not, she was correct. Her brother, in his folly, provided the seed capital. He frequently complained about his own ill-advised investments, a failed mining concern in Wales, a shipment of French wine that turned to vinegar. Over dinner one evening, he had railed against a particularly disastrous venture, slamming his fist on the table. £100, flushed down the drain like dishwater. I should have burned the notes in the grate. It would have been a more entertaining spectacle. Later that night, as she darned a hole in one of her nephew's stockings, Elara thought about those £100. A fortune to her, a mere inconvenience to him. An idea, so audacious it made her needle pause mid-stitch, began to form. It was not just about the money, it was about proving something to herself. That she, Elara Finch, the invisible woman, was more than the sum of society's expectations. The next morning, she performed her duties with her usual quiet efficiency. She wrote a letter to her sister-in-law's demanding milliner, settled a dispute between 2 of the younger children over a wooden soldier, and then, with a heart hammering against her ribs, she sat down at the small escritoire in her room. With money painstakingly saved from her allowance over 5 years, she had amassed a small sum. But it was not enough. She needed the Viscount's discarded pounds. It was a risk of a different kind. If she was caught, the consequences would be catastrophic. But the risk of remaining a ghost, of never knowing what she could achieve, felt, in that moment, far greater. She wrote a single crisp letter. To Mr. Jeremiah Thompson, broker, of Throgmorton Street. Sir, I have followed with interest your recent public offerings regarding the clipper ship Sea Sprite and its planned voyage to Canton. I am prepared to invest £200 in this venture. You will find the funds enclosed. Please direct all future correspondence regarding this and any other potential investments to me under the name of Mr. E. Finch at the address below. I value my privacy in these matters. Your obedient servant, Mr. E. Finch. She signed the name with a flourish she had practiced 100 times. It was a simple deception, a masculine initial that could belong to anyone. She then visited her brother's study while he was out. His strongbox, as she knew, was secured with a lock whose mechanism she had memorized months ago, purely as an academic exercise. It took her less than a minute to open it and extract 5 crumpled £20 notes. She replaced the box, her hands steady, and walked out. The letter and the money were posted that afternoon. There was no turning back. The first response from Mr. Thompson arrived a fortnight later, addressed to Mr. E. Finch. Ilara's hands trembled as she broke the seal. It was a formal acknowledgement of the investment, written in a neat, professional hand. She read it 5 times, a dizzying sense of power coursing through her. She had done it. She had entered a world that was utterly forbidden to her, and the gatekeeper had not even noticed. From that point on, a secret life bloomed alongside her mundane one. By day, she was the placid, self-effacing Miss Finch, enduring the vapid chatter of Lady Ashworth's tea parties and the patronising smiles of her brother's guests. By night, in the solitude of her room, she was Mr. E. Finch, a shrewd and increasingly confident investor. She pored over shipping manifests, studied the political climate in the Far East, and learned to read the subtle signals in the dry, factual language of the broker's letters. Mr. Jeremiah Thompson, a man who judged solely by profit and loss, was initially puzzled by his new client. Mr. Finch's instructions were always precise, his reasoning cogent, and his instincts, as proven by the Sea Sprite's highly successful voyage, were uncanny. The modest £200 returned a profit of nearly 300 more. Ilara, as Mr. Finch, immediately instructed Thompson to reinvest everything. The next venture was a risky one, a shipment of manufactured goods to the newly opened ports of Japan. Her brother, at dinner, declared it a fool's errand. "The Japanese are savages. They have no use for Lancashire cotton." Ilara quietly buttered a roll. She had read a detailed account from a Dutch trader in Nagasaki. The Japanese, it seemed, were not savages at all, but a sophisticated society with a burgeoning middle class, hungry for new goods. She had written to Mr. Finch, urging the investment. The ship returned 14 months later, its hold filled with exquisite silk and lacquerware that sold for 10 times the cost of the original cargo. Mr. E. Finch's capital grew exponentially. Within 3 years, the timid spinster in the corner of the drawing room was secretly one of the most successful private investors in London, her fortune managed by a man who had never laid eyes on her, who knew her only as a name on a letter, written in a hand that was firm, clear, and utterly without feminine flourish. And in all that time, no one ever looked twice at Miss Ilara Finch. She was, after all, invisible. Chapter 2. The Merchant's Lament. Mr. Silas Thorne was a man accustomed to being seen. Tall, dark-haired, with a smile that could charm a bird from a tree and a reputation for brilliance that preceded him into every room, he was the very embodiment of the successful merchant prince. His company, Thorne Maritime, was a legend built from the keel up, a fleet of sleek clipper ships that dominated the trade routes to the West Indies and the Mediterranean. He was a fixture at the most exclusive balls, a favourite of hostesses, and a man whose opinion on commerce was sought by lords and cabinet ministers alike. But at this moment, seated behind his vast mahogany desk, Silas Thorne looked like a man watching his own empire crumble into the sea. The letters were spread before him like a death sentence. One from his factor in Jamaica, detailing the devastation of a hurricane that had wrecked 3 of his best ships in port. Another from his agent in Liverpool, reporting that a vital shipment of sugar had been contaminated and was unsellable. A third, perhaps the most damning, was a formal notice from his primary lender, Baring Brothers, expressing their concern over his recent reversals and their inability to extend further credit without a significant infusion of capital. He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture of uncharacteristic agitation. His fleet, his magnificent fleet, was bleeding money. 2 more ships were due to sail in a month, but their holds were empty. He had no credit to purchase cargo, and no cargo meant no profit. It was a vicious, sinking spiral. A knock at the door preceded the entrance of his younger partner and dearest friend, Mr. Alistair Finch. There was no relation to Ilara. The shared surname was a mere coincidence of the era. Alistair was a gentle, bookish soul, the perfect complement to Silas's fiery dynamism. He managed the ledgers and the intricate web of correspondence that kept the business afloat. "Silas," Alistair said, his face creased with worry. "I've been through the figures again. There's no other way. We need an investor, a significant one." Silas let out a humourless laugh. "Investor? Alistair, who in their right mind would invest in a sinking ship? We're a bad risk. Barings has made that abundantly clear." "Not all money comes from banks," Alistair replied quietly, placing a sheaf of papers on the desk. "I've been following the market, the private investors. There's one, a shadow. He has no office, no public profile. He operates entirely through a broker on Throgmorton Street, a man named Jeremiah Thompson, but his track record is unparalleled." Silas leaned forward, his interest piqued despite his despair. "A shadow? What's his name?" "His correspondence is signed Mr. E. Finch," Alistair said, a faint wry smile touching his lips. "A namesake, it seems, though I can assure you I have no such golden touch." Silas took the papers. They were a summary Alistair had compiled of Mr. Finch's investments, the Sea Sprite to Canton, the Japanese venture, a dozen others, all meticulously chosen, all wildly successful. The capital growth was staggering. This Mr. Finch was not just wealthy, he was a genius. "He sees things others don't," Silas murmured, his eyes scanning the notes. "The Japan investment. Everyone thought it was madness, but he saw the opportunity. He has vision." "He has money," Alistair corrected gently. "Money we desperately need." A flicker of the old Silas Thorne, the man who could charm a sultan or negotiate a treaty, returned to his eyes. "Then we must find him. We must convince him. This Mr. Finch holds the key to our survival. Write to Thompson, request a meeting, offer him whatever he wants, a partnership, a share of future profits, my firstborn son if I had one. Just get him to the table." The reply from Jeremiah Thompson was polite but firm. Mr. Finch valued his privacy above all else. He did not grant personal meetings. All business was to be conducted through the established channel, that is, through Thompson himself. It was a frustrating, immovable obstacle. For weeks, Silas tried every angle. He wrote eloquent letters outlining the potential of his stranded fleet, the brilliant captains who commanded his ships, the enduring strength of his brand. They were masterpieces of persuasion, and they were all met with the same courteous, deflecting response from Thompson. The matter had been presented to Mr. Finch, and at this time he was not inclined to invest in Thorn Maritime. Society, meanwhile, continued its relentless rotation. Silas attended the requisite balls and soirees, his smile fixed in place, his eyes scanning the crowds not for eligible young ladies, but for a face that might belong to the mysterious Mr. Finch. He questioned other merchants, politicians, anyone who might have a connection to the shadowy investor. No one knew anything. Mr. E. Finch was a ghost. It was at one of these functions, a crush at the Duchess of Richmond's townhouse, that his path finally, unknowingly, crossed with his quarry. The ballroom was a riot of silk and candlelight, the air thick with perfume and the hum of conversation. Silas, having failed to glean any useful intelligence, stood by the refreshment table, his mood as dark as his evening coat. Lady Ashworth, a woman whose ambition far outstripped her lineage, descended upon him with all the subtlety of a cannonball. "Mr. Thorne, how wonderful to see you. You simply must come and dine with us. My husband has the most marauding, that is, the most interesting ideas about the sugar trade." Trailing in her wake, as ever, was her sister-in-law, Elara Finch. She was dressed in a gown of unassuming grey that made her look even more washed out than usual. Her hair was pulled back in a severe style, and she held a cup of untouched ratafia as if it were a shield. As Lady Ashworth monopolised Silas's attention, Elara stood a little to the side, her eyes politely downcast. But she was listening. Every word. She knew who Silas Thorne was, of course. His was a name that featured prominently in the shipping news, though recently for all the wrong reasons. She had read, with a detached professional interest, of his company's misfortunes. Her broker, Mr. Thompson, had even sent her a summary of Thorne's proposal, with a note that he considered the man brilliant, but the current situation highly volatile. Ilara had declined. The risk was too great for the current structure of her portfolio. Now, seeing the man himself, she was struck by the palpable tension beneath his polished veneer. He was charming to Lady Ashworth, yes, offering her a smile that made several nearby matrons sigh. But his eyes, they were the eyes of a man calculating his next move in a game he was losing. "Simply devastating about your ships," Lady Ashworth was saying, her tone a poor imitation of sympathy. "Such a dreadful blow. I told Lord Ashworth, I said, the sugar trade is so precarious. One bad storm and... Well, you must be dreadfully worried." It was a crass and insensitive thing to say. Silas's smile tightened almost imperceptibly. "One weathers the storms, Lady Ashworth, in business as in life. Thorne Maritime has weathered many. We shall weather this one." His gaze, as he spoke, drifted for a moment from his tedious companion. It landed on the quiet woman in grey. For a fraction of a second their eyes met. Ilara did not flinch or simper. She held his gaze with a calm, steady intelligence that was utterly at odds with her mousy appearance. It was a look of pure, objective assessment. She was sizing him up. The moment was so brief, so unexpected, that Silas almost missed it. Then the woman blinked, her eyes dropped back to her ratafia, and the dull, placid mask was back in place. Lady Ashworth, oblivious, prattled on. "And so I said to the Duchess, if one cannot rely on one's ships, what can one rely on? You must agree." Silas dragged his attention back. "Indeed, Lady Ashworth. One must rely on one's own judgment." But a small seed of curiosity had been planted. As the evening wore on, he found his gaze drifting back to the grey woman. She never spoke to anyone of consequence. She fetched shawls, refilled teacups, and listened with a patient, vacant expression to an elderly dowager's rambling story. She was the very picture of a useful, invisible spinster. And yet, that look, it had been sharp, analytical, and utterly fearless. It was the kind of look he might give a competitor across a negotiating table. He shook his head, dismissing the thought. It was a trick of the candlelight. He was so obsessed with finding his mysterious investor that he was starting to see him in every shadow, every face. The woman in grey was a nobody, a ghost, and ghosts, he knew, held no fortunes. Chapter 3. A Meeting of Minds. The season wore on, and with it, Silas Thorne's desperation deepened. His creditors grew more insistent. The 2 empty ships sat in dock, accruing harbour fees, their sails furled like the wings of dying birds. He had slimmed his household, let go of trusted staff, and still the financial abyss yawned wider. Ilara Finch watched his decline from her corner of the world, reading between the lines of the society gossip. Mr. Thorne was seen at the opera, his expression grim. Thorne Maritime's troubles are the talk of the exchange. She felt a strange, unexpected pang. It was not pity, exactly. It was the recognition of a formidable mind trapped in a losing battle, and she, more than anyone, understood the value of a formidable mind. His proposal, which Mr. Thompson had forwarded, was brilliant. She had studied it for hours. He wasn't just asking for money, he was offering a vision for restructuring his entire fleet, focusing on faster, more versatile ships and diversifying into new, emerging markets she herself had identified. The problem was the execution. His current liabilities were a lead weight around the neck of his beautiful plan. He needed someone to cut that weight free. One evening, a servant delivered a letter to her room. It was from Mr. Thompson, but it was thicker than usual. Inside, alongside the standard market report, was a private, handwritten note from the broker himself. It was a breach of protocol, and it spoke of unusual circumstances. My dear Mr. Finch, I hope you will forgive this unorthodox direct correspondence. I feel I must impress upon you the seriousness of Mr. Silas Thorne's situation. He has approached me again, personally, his usual composure entirely abandoned. He is a proud man on his knees, and he believes with a fervour that is quite compelling that only you can save his company. He has asked me to convey a new offer. He is not seeking a loan, but a partner. He is willing to cede a significant ownership stake in Thorne Maritime in exchange for the capital to clear his debts and fund his new vision. He believes in your judgment, Mr. Finch. He has followed your investments as closely as I have. He says, and I quote, "Mr. Finch sees what others do not. I need that vision as much as I need his gold. I have taken the liberty of including a full, audited accounting of Thorne Maritime's current liabilities and assets. I have vetted the figures myself. The situation is grave, but the core of the company, its reputation, its experienced captains, its loyal network of factors, remains sound. The decision, of course, is yours, but I would be remiss in my duty if I did not tell you that I believe this is the most significant opportunity you have yet been offered. Your obedient servant, Jeremiah Thompson." Ilara read the letter 3 times. A partner, an ownership stake. It was a far cry from a simple investment. It was an entanglement. It was a risk of a magnitude she had never before contemplated, but it was the quote that snagged in her mind. He sees what others do not. It was the highest praise one strategist could give another. It was a recognition of her intellect, of the very thing she had to keep hidden from the world. This man, this charismatic, desperate merchant understood her, or rather, he understood the mind of Mr. E. Finch. And that, she realized with a jolt, was almost the same thing. She spent a sleepless night pacing her small room, the floorboards cold under her bare feet. She analysed the figures, weighed the risks against the potential rewards. By dawn, a plan had formed in her mind, a plan so audacious it made her first stolen investment seem like child's play. It would require her to step out of the shadows, if only for a moment, and reveal herself. Not as Ilara Finch, the spinster, but as the mind behind the fortune. The next afternoon, she penned a letter to Mr. Thompson. It was brief. "Mr. Thompson, I am persuaded by your argument. I am willing to meet with Mr. Thorne to discuss the terms of a potential partnership. However, the meeting must be on my terms. It will take place at my private residence on the afternoon of Thursday next. I will send a carriage for him. Please inform him that he is to tell no one of this appointment, and that he must come alone." "The address is 17 Alderney Street, Mr. E. Finch." The address was not a grand townhouse in a fashionable square. It was a modest, respectable lodging house in a quiet corner of Bloomsbury, a place Ilara had secretly rented years ago as a bolt hole, a place where she could be alone, where she could read her financial papers without fear of interruption. It was furnished simply, with a desk, a few chairs, and a small library of books on commerce and navigation. It was the true home of Mr. E. Finch. On Thursday, Ilara arrived early. She wore her most severe grey dress, her hair pinned up tightly. She was not trying to look like a man. That would be a fool's errand. She was simply going as herself, in her own space. This was her domain, and here she would not be invisible. Silas Thorne's journey to Alderney Street was the strangest of his life. The carriage was plain but comfortable, the driver silent. It carried him away from the glittering squares of Mayfair and into a part of London he barely knew. When it stopped outside the unassuming house, he felt a tremor of doubt. Was this some kind of elaborate hoax? Was the great Mr. Finch a miser who lived in such mean circumstances? He knocked on the door. It was opened not by a butler but by a woman in a grey dress, the woman from the Duchess of Richmond's ball, the invisible one. For a long, stupefied moment, Silas simply stared. His mind, usually so quick, refused to work. He looked past her, expecting to see the real Mr. Finch standing in the shadowed hallway. There was no one. Ilara met his stunned gaze with the same calm, steady look she had given him at the ball. "Mr. Thorne," she said, her voice low and even. "Thank you for coming. Please come in." He stepped inside as if in a dream. The parlour was neat, bookish, and utterly feminine in its quiet order. And yet, on the small desk, he saw the familiar cream-coloured paper, the distinctive, firm handwriting of the correspondence he had studied for months. He turned to face her, his expression a maelstrom of confusion, disbelief, and dawning, horrifying comprehension. "You," he breathed. "You are Mr. Finch?" "I am the person who has conducted business under that name, yes," Ilara said, gesturing to a chair. "Please, sit down. We have a great deal to discuss, and I believe you have a proposal to make." He did not sit. He was too stunned. "This is impossible. You're a woman." He said the word as if it were an accusation. "An astute observation, Mr. Thorne," Ilara replied, a flicker of dry amusement in her eyes. "I am also the investor who turned £200 into a fortune that could easily absorb your company's debts and fund its rebirth. Shall we focus on that, or shall we continue to state the obvious?" Her directness, her absolute command of the situation, struck him like a physical blow. He looked at her again, truly looked this time. He saw the fine lines of intelligence around her eyes, the set of her jaw that spoke of unwavering determination, the quiet confidence with which she stood in her own space. The mousy spinster was gone. In her place was a woman of formidable power. He sank into the chair, his legs finally giving way. "How?" was all he could manage. "With patience, study, and a profound desire to not be defined by the narrow expectations of my sex," Ilara said, taking a seat opposite him. She folded her hands in her lap. "Now, Mr. Thorne, you are here because you believe I have the vision to see the potential in your company. You were correct. I do see it. But I see the risks more clearly than ever, now that I see the man behind them. You are proud, impulsive, and your current predicament is partly of your own making." Her words were harsh, but her tone was not unkind. It was clinical. Silas, to his credit, swallowed his pride. "You are not wrong, Miss Finch." The name felt strange on his tongue. "I overextended. I trusted in luck as much as judgment. It was a failing." "An expensive one," she agreed, "but your underlying strategy, the one you outlined in your proposal to me, is sound. More than sound, it is inspired. The focus on the Pacific trade routes, the investment in newer, faster clippers. It is exactly the direction the market will take in the coming decade." He stared at her, his professional admiration warring with his personal shock. She understood his plan. She understood it better than his own partner. She saw the future he had only glimpsed. "So, you will invest?" he asked, the hope in his voice raw and undisguised. "I will do more than invest," Ilara said. "I will accept your offer of a partnership. I will provide the capital to clear your debts and fund your new vision. In return, I will hold a 49% stake in Thorne Maritime." He blinked. 49% was a huge share, leaving him with a bare majority. But what choice did he have? He opened his mouth to agree, but she held up a hand to stop him. "However," she continued, her voice dropping, "my partnership comes with one condition that is not negotiable. A condition that must be met before a single pound changes hands." Silas's heart, which had just begun to soar, plummeted back to earth. "Name it." "The world, my world, must continue to believe that Mr. E. Finch is a man," she said. "Our business arrangements, our partnership, will be conducted in the strictest confidence. To the outside world, you will have secured the investment of the mysterious Mr. Finch. That is all they need to know. In private, we will meet here, or correspond through Mr. Thompson as before." You will tell no one. Not your partner, not your family, not your closest friend. My identity is a secret upon which my entire existence depends. If it were to come out, I would be ruined. My brother would have me committed. I would lose everything. The weight of her request settled on his shoulders. He understood, in a way he had never understood anything before, the cage in which she lived. This quiet room, these books, this secret identity. It was not a game. It was her only path to freedom. He met her unwavering gaze. You are trusting me with your life, Miss Finch. Yes, she said simply. I am. I am trusting that the man who had the wisdom to seek out Mr. Finch's counsel is also a man of honour who can be trusted with the truth. Am I wrong, Mr. Thorne? For a long moment, the only sound was the faint crackle of the fire in the grate. Silas Thorne looked at this woman who had bested every obstacle society had placed in her path, who had built an empire from nothing but intellect and courage, and who was now offering him not just salvation, but a partnership of equals. The last vestiges of his shock fell away, replaced by a profound and humbling respect. He rose from his chair, walked over to her and extended his hand. You are not wrong, Miss Finch. It would be an honour to go into business with Mr. E. Finch, and an even greater honour to know the real person behind the name. Ilara looked at his outstretched hand. It was the first time a man had ever offered her his hand as an equal, not as a courtesy to a weaker vessel. She rose and took it. His grip was warm, firm, and respectful. Then we have an agreement, partner, she said, and for the first time in his presence, she smiled. It was a small, quiet smile, but it transformed her face, lighting it from within. And Silas Thorne, the man who had charmed duchesses and beauties alike, felt his breath catch in his throat. He had come to Alderney Street looking for a saviour. He had found one, but he had also found something he had never expected, a mystery far more intriguing than any shadowy investor could ever be. Chapter 4. The Wind and the Wave. The partnership transformed them both. For Silas, it was a humbling education. He would arrive at the little house on Alderney Street, his mind buzzing with grand schemes and bold ventures. Ilara would listen, her grey eyes intent, and then, with a few quiet questions, she would dissect his plans, exposing the weaknesses he had overlooked, the risks he had dismissed. She had a mind like a surgeon's scalpel, precise and unerring. In turn, he gave her something she had never possessed, a champion in the world of men. He took her ideas, her strategies, and implemented them. When he appeared at the shipping exchange, it was his voice that proclaimed the new direction of Thorne Maritime, but the vision was as much hers as his. The mysterious Mr. Finch's continued faith in the company was whispered about with awe, further cementing the legend of the invisible investor. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, the nature of their meetings began to shift. The sessions grew longer. The discussions would drift from cargo manifests and market trends to politics, philosophy, the books they had read. Silas discovered she had a dry, witty sense of humour that she had kept hidden for decades. Ilara discovered that beneath the charming merchant prince was a man of deep feeling, who worried about his crews, who took the loss of a ship not just as a financial blow, but as a personal failure. One blustery autumn evening, after a particularly gruelling session reviewing the final accounts for the year, a year that had seen Thorne Maritime not only recover, but thrive, Silas leaned back in his chair with a satisfied sigh. We did it, he said, a note of wonder in his voice. The debts are cleared. The new ships are launched and profitable. The company is stronger than it has ever been. And it's because of you. Ilara shook her head, a faint blush colouring her cheeks. It is because of us. My capital and your execution. It was a fair partnership. He looked at her, silhouetted against the firelight. The severe grey dresses had been replaced, subtly, over the months. Tonight she wore a gown of deep blue merino that brought warmth to her complexion. Her hair was still pinned up, but a few soft curls had escaped to frame her face. She looked, he thought, not invisible at all. She looked beautiful. "It is more than a business partnership, Ilara," he said quietly, using her given name for the first time. It felt natural, right? Her eyes met his, and for once, the calm, analytical mask slipped. He saw a flicker of uncertainty, of hope, of a fear so profound it made his heart ache. "Silas," she began, her voice unsteady. "We must be careful. The world be damned," he said, rising and crossing to her. He knelt by her chair, taking her hand in his. "I have spent the last year getting to know the most remarkable person I have ever met. I have watched you navigate a world that is actively hostile to you with more grace and intelligence than any general commanding an army. I have fallen in love with you, Ilara Finch, not with Mr. Finch's fortune, but with you." A single tear escaped and traced a path down her cheek. "You cannot mean it. I am a spinster. I am invisible. I am—" "You are the woman who saved me," he interrupted, his voice fierce and tender. "You are the woman who sees what others do not. And I see you. I see all of you. And I love you." He reached into his pocket and drew out a small velvet box. He opened it to reveal a simple, elegant ring with a single, flawless pearl. "This was my mother's. She was a quiet woman like you, but she had a strength that my father leaned on every day of their marriage. I see that same strength in you. Ilara, will you do me the unimaginable honor of becoming my wife?" Ilara looked from the ring to his face, so full of earnest hope. The fear was still there, a cold knot in her stomach. "Your world, society, they will not understand. They will think you have lost your mind, marrying a woman like me for what? They will say you did it for my money, that I trapped you." He lifted his hand and gently cupped her face. "Let them talk. Let them say what they will. Our life, our marriage, will be our answer. We will build it together, on truth and respect. And as for the money—" He smiled, a glint of the old Silas Thorne charm in his eyes. "My love, you own 49% of my company. I am marrying my brilliant secret business partner. It is the most sensible merger I have ever negotiated." A laugh, watery but genuine, escaped her lips. The knot of fear began to loosen, replaced by a warmth that spread through her entire being. He was right. He saw her. He loved her. Not the spinster, not the shadow, but the woman who had dared to be more. She looked at him, this man who had been her adversary, her supplicant, and was now her partner in every sense. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, Silas." The announcement of Mr. Silas Thorne's engagement to Miss Ilara Finch caused a scandal that reverberated through every drawing room in London. Just as Silas predicted, the whispers were vicious. "A fortune hunter," the matrons hissed. "The poor man, trapped by a desperate spinster who must have thrown herself at him." It is the money, of course. He must have been promised a fortune to marry such a drab creature. Lady Ashworth was apoplectic with rage and wounded pride. My own sister-in-law under my very roof, the deceit of it. She must have been plotting this for years, insinuating herself into our lives. Her brother, the Viscount, was equally incensed, though for different reasons. He saw a potential fortune slipping through his fingers. When Ilara came to collect her meagre belongings, he cornered her in the hallway. "This is an outrage, Ilara. You owe your position in society to my charity, and this is how you repay me, with sneaking and secret engagements. I demand to know the terms. What settlement has Thorne offered? As your guardian, it is my right to know." Ilara faced him, and for the first time in her life, she felt no fear, no need to fade into the wallpaper. She was no longer the invisible woman. She was Ilara Finch, partner in Thorne Maritime. She was beloved. You are not my guardian brother, she said calmly. You are my landlord, and a poor one at that. The settlement is my own affair, but I can assure you Mr. Thorne is not marrying me for a fortune. He is marrying me in spite of the one I already possess. The Viscount stared, uncomprehending. What fortune? What nonsense is this? Ilara smiled, a cool, serene smile that was utterly her own. I am Mr. E. Finch, she said. I own 49% of Thorne Maritime. The fortune that saved your own brother-in-law from ruin was mine. I earned it, penny by penny, while you were busy losing yours. So you see, I do not need your permission, your approval, or your charity. I never did. She walked past him, leaving him gaping in the hallway, his world-view shattered into 1,000 pieces. The wedding was a quiet affair, held in the little church near Alderney Street, attended only by Alistair Finch, who, after the initial shock, had become Ilara's greatest admirer and champion, and Mr. Jeremiah Thompson, who wept openly with a mixture of joy and professional vindication. In the years that followed, the whispers did not stop entirely, but they changed. People noted the astonishing success of Thorne Maritime, how it seemed to navigate every market shift with uncanny precision. They noted how Mr. Thorne would often seek a quiet word with his wife at social gatherings, how he valued her opinion above all others. They noted the intelligence in her grey eyes, the quiet confidence with which she moved through a world that had once rendered her invisible. One evening, at a grand ball hosted by a humbled Lady Ashworth, who had learned, if not to love her sister-in-law, then at least to fear her financial power, Silas and Ilara stood together on the edge of the dance floor. The music swirled, the silks and jewels glittered, but their attention was on each other. "Do you remember," Silas murmured, "the first time I saw you? At a ball just like this. You looked at me as if you were calculating my worth on a ledger." Ilara smiled, leaning into him slightly. "I was, and I found you lacking." He laughed, a sound of pure joy. "And now?" She turned to look up at him, her husband, her partner, her dearest friend. The ballroom, with all its judgment and glitter, faded away. There was only him. "Now," she said softly, "I find you are my greatest investment, and the return has been beyond my wildest dreams." He lifted her hand and pressed a kiss to her palm, a gesture of intimacy that would have scandalized the onlookers. He did not care. "And you, my love, are the best secret I have ever kept." From her corner of the world, the invisible woman had not only found a fortune, she had found herself, and in doing so, she had captured not just a merchant's fleet, but his heart. The spinster's secret investment had paid off in ways she had never dared to imagine. The end.